Before you get comfortable listening to this, understand something. Comfort is exactly what has been keeping you stuck. Comfort is why days blur into each other. Comfort is why months pass and nothing changes. Comfort is why you wake up with big thoughts but go to sleep with the same results. And I'm not here to make you feel good for a few minutes. I'm here to make you uncomfortable enough to finally be honest with yourself. Because if you were truly satisfied with where your life is right now, you wouldn't be here listening to this. Something inside you knows you're meant for more, and that feeling you've been carrying is not ambition. It's frustration with your own delay. Right now, there are two versions of you in the room. One version wants growth, power, discipline, and a life that actually matches your potential. The other version wants comfort, distractions, and the familiar patterns that don't demand much from you. These two versions fight every single day. One tells you to push. The other tells you to relax. One tells you to change. The other tells you that tomorrow is a better time. And the version that wins is the one you keep feeding. If you've been feeding comfort, don't be surprised by the results you're getting. You don't drift into a powerful life. You drift into a weak one. Power requires intention. Growth requires pressure. Change requires you to betray the version of you that wants to stay the same. This is not about hype. This is about the truth you've been avoiding. Nobody is coming to save you from the habits you keep choosing. Nobody is coming to rescue you from the comfort zone you refuse to leave. You can blame circumstances, people, luck, or timing. But at the end of the day, the common factor in every delay is you. That's not an insult. That's responsibility. And responsibility is power because it means you can change something starting today. The moment you start outsourcing your future to excuses is the moment you start owning your direction. If you stay until the end of this video, you're not just listening to words. You're standing at a psychological edge. On one side is the version of you that keeps repeating the same cycle. On the other side is the version of you that decides this pattern ends here. What you hear next is not meant to entertain you. It's meant to challenge the identity you've been protecting. It's meant to confront the part of you that negotiates with discipline, that delays hard decisions, that chooses comfort over growth. This is not for people who want motivation for 5 minutes. This is for people who are ready to change how they see themselves. By the time this video ends, you will either close it and go back to being who you were, or you will feel something shift in how you think about discomfort, fear, discipline, pain, and courage. You will start to see your comfort zone not as safety, but as a cage you've been living in with the door open. The only thing left is whether you walk out. Stay with me, not because it's easy, but because the version of you that can change your life is waiting on the other side of the words you're about to hear. You're not tired. You're comfortable. And comfort is the most dangerous place a human being can live in because it doesn't feel like danger at all. It feels warm. It feels safe. It feels familiar. It feels like relief after a long day. It feels like staying where you are because at least you know what to expect. But what comfort really does is slowly numb your hunger for more. It slowly lowers your standards. It slowly convinces you that the version of life you're living right now is good enough. Even when deep inside you know it's nowhere near what you're capable of becoming. Comfort doesn't attack your dreams directly. It puts them to sleep, and while your dreams are sleeping, your potential is being wasted one easy day at a time. The reason comfort is so dangerous is because it doesn't feel like failure. Failure is loud. Failure hurts. Failure forces you to confront yourself. Comfort is quiet. Comfort whispers. Comfort tells you, relax, you've done enough. Comfort tells you, you deserve a break, even when you've barely started. Comfort tells you, tomorrow will be a better time, and tomorrow becomes next week, next month, next year. You don't wake up one day and realize comfort ruined your life. You wake up one day and realize time passed and nothing changed. You realize the dreams you had are still dreams. The goals you talked about are still just conversations. The person you wanted to become is still a version of you that exists only in your imagination. Comfort slowly kills your edge. It makes you allergic to struggle. The moment something feels hard, you start looking for an escape. The moment something challenges you, you start looking for a shortcut. The moment something demands discipline, you start negotiating with your feelings. And that negotiation is where greatness dies. Greatness requires you to do things that don't feel good in the moment. Greatness requires you to wake up when your body wants to sleep, to focus when your mind wants distraction, to work when your emotions want comfort. But when you've lived in comfort too long, struggle feels like punishment instead of training. You begin to see discomfort as something to avoid instead of something to embrace. And when you avoid discomfort, you avoid growth. There is no growth without pressure. There is no strength without resistance. There is no transformation without friction. Comfort doesn't just make you lazy physically, it makes you weak mentally. It trains your mind to look for the easiest option in every situation. It trains your mind to quit the moment things don't go your way. It trains your mind to believe that you need to feel motivated before you move. Over time, you start identifying as someone who tries instead of someone who finishes. You start identifying as someone who has potential instead of someone who has results. You become someone who talks about what they're going to do instead of someone who is doing it. Comfort turns you into a spectator of your own life. You watch other people take risks, build businesses, transform their bodies, master skills, and live boldly. And you tell yourself stories about why your time will come later. But later is just a lie. Comfort tells you to keep you exactly where you are. The silent killer part of comfort is that it convinces you that you're safe while it slowly robs you of urgency. Urgency is what makes people move. Urgency is what makes people take action before they feel ready. Urgency is what pushes people to change habits, cut distractions, and make hard decisions. Comfort kills urgency. When you're too comfortable, you don't feel the pressure to change. You don't feel the fire under your feet. You don't feel the hunger in your stomach. You feel okay. And okay is the most dangerous emotional state because it's not painful enough to force change, but it's not fulfilling enough to bring peace. It's a numb middle ground where years disappear without progress. You survive, but you don't evolve. Comfort also lies to you about stability. It makes you believe that staying the same is safer than changing. But staying the same is actually the riskiest move you can make in a world that is constantly changing. The skills you don't build today become the gaps that hurt you tomorrow. The courage you don't develop today becomes the fear that controls you later. The discipline you avoid today becomes the regret you carry in the future. Comfort creates the illusion of security while quietly building the foundation for future pain. It makes you feel protected in the moment, but it leaves you unprepared for what's coming. And life is not gentle with people who stay unprepared. Another way comfort kills greatness is by shrinking your vision of what's possible. When you stay in the same routines, the same environments, the same circles, and the same habits, your mind stops seeing bigger possibilities. Your world becomes small because your experiences are small. Your expectations become limited because your actions are limited. You stop dreaming big, not because big dreams are impossible, but because big dreams require big effort. And comfort doesn't like effort. Comfort prefers predictability. Comfort prefers control. Comfort prefers not being challenged. So over time, you start designing your life around what's convenient instead of what's meaningful. You start choosing paths that require less courage instead of paths that unlock more potential. And slowly, the fire that once made you believe you could become something extraordinary begins to fade. Comfort also protects your excuses. When you're comfortable, your excuses sound reasonable. They sound logical. They sound mature. You tell yourself you're being patient when in reality you're being afraid. You tell yourself you're being realistic when in reality you're being small. You tell yourself you're waiting for the right time when in reality you're waiting to feel safe. Comfort gives your excuses a nice voice. It makes them sound wise instead of weak. It makes inaction feel responsible. It makes delay feel strategic. And because those excuses don't feel wrong, you keep believing them. Meanwhile, the person you could have become fades further into the distance. The most brutal truth about comfort is that it doesn't steal your future all at once. It steals it in tiny, almost invisible moments. One skipped workout, one avoided conversation, one delayed decision, one more day of saying, I'll start tomorrow, one more night of choosing distraction over discipline. None of these moments feel like a big deal by themselves, but stacked together, they build a life of mediocrity, not because you weren't capable of more, but because you kept choosing what felt good over what would make you great. Comfort is patient. It's willing to take your life one easy choice at a time. If you're honest with yourself, you already know this. You already know the areas of your life where you've been choosing comfort over growth. You already know the habits you keep that don't move you forward. You already know the work you've been avoiding. The question isn't whether comfort is holding you back. The question is whether you're finally willing to let go of the safety it pretends to give you. Because the moment you choose discomfort on purpose, the moment you choose the hard path, the moment you stop negotiating with your comfort zone, you begin to wake up. You begin to feel alive again. You begin to feel hungry again. You begin to remember that you were never meant to live a small, quiet life. You were meant to be challenged. You were meant to struggle. You were meant to grow. Growth is not found in places that feel safe. Growth lives where your comfort ends and your excuses start to fall apart. The moment you step into discomfort, you step into the only environment that forces you to become more than you are right now. Comfort preserves who you are. Discomfort transforms who you are. And if you keep choosing comfort, you are choosing to stay the same, even if you tell yourself you want more from life. Nothing new is built in familiar territory. Familiar territory is designed to keep you as you are, not to evolve you into who you could become. Discomfort is the language of growth. Every time your body aches from effort, your mind stretches from learning, or your emotions shake from facing something you've been avoiding, something inside you is being built. Muscles grow by being torn and repaired. Skills grow by being tested and refined. Character grows by being challenged and strengthened. There is no version of growth that does not involve some level of strain. If there were, everyone would be great. If growth felt easy, discipline would be unnecessary, courage would be irrelevant, and transformation would be common. But growth is rare. Precisely because discomfort is uncomfortable, and most people run from what feels uncomfortable. The problem is not that discomfort hurts. The problem is that we have been trained to avoid anything that hurts. We live in a world designed to make everything easy, fast, and convenient. Food is delivered. Entertainment is instant. Distractions are endless. The moment you feel bored, tired, or uneasy, you can escape into something that numbs the feeling. Over time, this constant escape rewires your brain to seek relief instead of results. You begin to associate discomfort with danger instead of development. You begin to believe that if something feels hard, it must be wrong. But the truth is, the hard thing is usually the right thing. The path that challenges you is the path that changes you. Discomfort forces honesty. When you're uncomfortable, you can't hide from your weaknesses. You can't pretend you're better prepared than you are. You can't rely on autopilot. You are exposed to your limits, your gaps, your fears, and your lack of discipline. And that exposure is painful to the ego. The ego wants to believe you're already good enough. Oh, already capable, already strong enough, but growth requires you to admit that you're not yet what you want to be. It requires humility. It requires you to look at your current self and say, this version of me is not enough to build the future I want. That kind of honesty only comes when you're stretched beyond what's familiar. Discomfort also builds resilience. When you constantly choose easy paths, your tolerance for difficulty becomes weak. Small obstacles feel like failure. Criticism feels personal. But when you repeatedly put yourself in uncomfortable situations, you train your nervous system to handle stress. You train your emotions to not control your actions. Over time, what once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt scary becomes normal. What once felt impossible becomes routine. This is how strength is built, not by avoiding hard moments, but by surviving them and learning from them. Another truth about growth is that it requires you to break the identity you're attached to. You are not just uncomfortable because the action is hard. You are uncomfortable because the action threatens the version of you that feels familiar. Change is uncomfortable because it asks you to let go of who you've been. It asks you to release habits that feel like part of your personality. It asks you to stop identifying as the person who procrastinates, the person who plays small, the person who avoids risk, the person who stays quiet, the person who waits for permission. Discomfort is the feeling of an old identity dying. And death, even symbolic death, is uncomfortable. But without that death, there is no rebirth. You cannot become someone new while clinging to the comfort of who you were. Discomfort also sharpens your focus. When things are too comfortable, your attention becomes scattered. You drift. You waste time. You lose urgency. But when you put yourself in challenging situations, your senses wake up. You become more present. You become more aware of your choices. You stop moving on autopilot and start acting with intention. Struggle has a way of cutting through nonsense. It strips away distractions and forces you to deal with what actually matters. In discomfort, you learn what you're made of because you can't hide behind comfort anymore. You meet yourself at a deeper level. One of the biggest lies people believe is that they should wait until they feel ready before stepping into discomfort. Readiness is a myth. If you wait till you feel ready, you will stay where you are forever, because growth always demands more than you currently have. You grow into readiness by stepping into what you're not ready for yet. You learn by doing things you're not yet good at. You become strong by lifting weights that feel too heavy at first. You become confident by taking actions that scare you. Discomfort is not something you eliminate before growth. Discomfort is the doorway you walk through to access growth. When you consistently choose discomfort, you begin to trust yourself at a deeper level. You start to see that you can survive hard days. You start to see that failure doesn't kill you. You start to see that exhaustion is temporary, but pride in your effort lasts longer. This self-trust is powerful because it changes how you see challenges. Challenges stop looking like threats and start looking like opportunities to test your character. You no longer ask, what if I fail? You start asking, what will I become if I don't try? The tragedy is that many people never experience what they're capable of because they refuse to step into discomfort long enough to discover it. They judge their potential base and on their comfort zone performance. But your comfort zone performance is not your true capacity. Your true capacity only shows up when you are pushed, stretched, and tested. You don't know how strong you are until life puts weight on your shoulders. You don't know how disciplined you are until motivation disappears. You don't know how focused you are until distractions are everywhere. Discomfort reveals the real you, and that version of you is far more powerful than the one that lives comfortably. If you want to grow, you have to build a relationship with discomfort. Not a relationship where you enjoy pain for the sake of pain, but a relationship where you respect what discomfort produces. You have to stop seeing it as an enemy and start seeing it as a signal that you're moving in the right direction. Every time you feel resistance, it's an invitation to lean in instead of back away. Every time you feel fear, it's a reminder that you're standing at the edge of something meaningful. Growth begins the moment you stop running from discomfort and start walking straight into it, knowing that on the other side of that discomfort is a stronger, sharper, more capable version of you. Fear is not the enemy you've been taught to believe it is. Fear is information. Fear is feedback. Fear is your nervous system waking you up to the fact that you are about to step into something unfamiliar, uncertain, and meaningful. The problem is not that fear shows up. The problem is that you've been trained to interpret fear as a command to stop instead of a signal to prepare and move forward anyway. Most people treat fear like a red light. In reality, fear is more like a warning sign on a road that leads somewhere important. The sign doesn't mean turn around. It means pay attention, slow down if you need to, and drive with awareness. But you still drive. Fear exists to protect you from real anger, but it also shows up when your comfort zone is being threatened. Your brain doesn't like uncertainty. It prefers predictability because predictability feels safe. So when you think about changing careers, starting something new, speaking up, setting boundaries, or chasing a bigger vision, your brain fires fear signals. Not because you're about to die, but because you're about to change. And change feels like danger to a system that evolved to keep you in familiar territory. So fear is not telling you that you're incapable. Fear is telling you that you're about to grow. The moment you decide to move in a new direction, fear will show up with logical arguments. It will remind you of everything that could go wrong. It will replay your past failures. It will bring up worst case scenarios. It will whisper that you're not ready, not skilled enough, not smart enough, not lucky enough. Fear is convincing because it uses your own voice. It doesn't sound like an enemy. It sounds like you being realistic. But realism without courage is just fear dressed in logic. If you obey every fearful thought, you end up living a life designed by the part of you that only wants to stay safe, not the part of you that wants to become great. One of the biggest mistakes people make is waiting for fear to disappear before they take action. Fear doesn't disappear first. Fear fades after action. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is movement in the presence of fear. The fear you feel before doing something hard is normal. The fear you feel while doing it is temporary. The confidence you feel after doing it is earned. But if you keep waiting for a fearless version of yourself to appear, you'll wait forever. The fearless version of you is built by repeatedly acting while afraid. Every time you take a step, despite fear, you teach your brain that fear is not a stop sign. You teach our nervous system that discomfort is survivable. Over time, fear loses its control because you stop obeying it. Fear also reveals what matters to you. You don't fear things that mean nothing. You fear things that carry weight. You fear speaking up because your voice matters. You fear taking risks because the outcome matters. You fear failing because success matters to you. Fear points directly at the things you care about most. So when fear shows up, instead of asking, how do I get rid of this feeling? Ask, what is this fear trying to show me about what I value? The presence of fear is often proof that the path you're considering is significant. Safe, meaningless paths don't provoke fear. Meaningful paths do. Another reason fear is a signal and not a stop sign is because fear is rooted in imagined futures. Most of the time, you're not afraid of what is happening right now. You're afraid of what might happen. You're afraid of rejection that hasn't occurred yet. You're afraid of failure that hasn't happened yet. You're afraid of embarrassment that only exists in your mind. Your brain creates future scenarios and reacts to them emotionally as if they're real. But these scenarios are guesses, not facts. When you let fear control your actions, you are allowing imagined outcomes to dictate your real behavior. You are sacrificing real growth to avoid hypothetical pain. And that trade is almost always a bad deal. Fear shrinks when exposed to action. When fear stays in your head, it grows. It becomes dramatic. It becomes exaggerated. It feels bigger than you. But when you move, fear is forced into reality. It becomes specific. It becomes manageable. You realize that what you imagined was often worse than what actually happens. Even when things don't go perfectly, you discover that you can handle more than you thought. This is how fear loses power. Not by positive thinking alone, but by repeated exposure to the things you're afraid of. Action is fear's natural enemy. Fear also teaches you where you need to build skills and preparation. A signal is useful because it tells you where to focus. If you're afraid of public speaking, that fear is pointing to a skill you can develop. If you're afraid of starting a business, that fear is pointing to areas where you need knowledge and planning. If you're afraid of setting boundaries, that fear is pointing to emotional muscles you haven't trained yet. Fear doesn't just warn you, it directs you. Instead of obeying fear by stopping, you can use fear as a map. Let it show you where your weaknesses are so you can strengthen them. Let it highlight where you need growth so you can train intentionally. One of the most damaging things you can do is let fear define your identity. When you repeatedly back down from things that scare you, you start to see yourself as someone who avoids challenge. You start to believe you are not that type of person. You tell yourself stories about being naturally shy, naturally cautious, naturally unlucky. But these are not fixed traits. They are habits built by repeated obedience to fear. Identity is shaped by action. When you consistently act despite fear, your identity shifts. You start seeing yourself as someone who shows up under pressure, someone who takes risks, someone who moves forward even when it's uncomfortable. This shift in self-image is powerful because it changes your future behavior. You don't just do brave things, you become someone who does brave things. Fear never fully disappears, especially when you're leveling up. New levels bring new fears. Bigger goals come with bigger risks. But the difference between people who grow and people who stay stuck is not that one group feels fear and the other doesn't. The difference is in how they respond to fear. One group listens to fear and stays where they are. The other group listens to fear, acknowledges it, and moves anyway. They treat fear as a companion on the journey, not a dictator of direction. They let fear ride in the passenger seat, not take the wheel. If you want to leave your comfort zone, you have to reframe your relationship with fear. Stop asking for fear to go away. Start asking for the courage to move with fear present. Stop seeing fear as proof that you're not ready. Start seeing fear as proof that you're on the edge of something that can change you. Every time fear shows up and you choose action instead of retreat, you expand the boundaries of who you are. Over time, what once terrified you becomes part of your normal life. Not because you became fearless, but because you became stronger than the fear that once controlled you. You cannot build a new life with the same version of yourself that created the old one. That's the truth most people don't want to accept because it means you can't just change your goals, you have to change your identity. You can't just want a different future, you have to become a different person internally to be able to carry that future. The habits you have right now, the way you think right now, the way you react to pressure right now, the way you handle discipline right now, all of that created the results you're living with today. If you keep the same inner structure and only change the outer dreams, the dreams will collapse under the weight of your old patterns. The hardest part about growth is not learning new skills. The hardest part is letting go of the version of you that feels familiar. Even if that version is broken, undisciplined, distracted, fearful, or inconsistent, it still feels like you. Your mind is attached to that identity because it knows how to operate from that place. Changing means stepping into uncertainty about who you are becoming. It means acting in ways that feel unnatural at first. It means disappointing the part of you that wants comfort, validation, and easy rewards. That's why people say they want change, but keep repeating the same behaviors. They want new results without having to let the old self die. But growth demands a death before rebirth. Not a physical death, but the death of outdated beliefs, weak habits, and small self-concepts. Your old self is built on stories you've told yourself for years. Stories about what you can and can't do. Stories about who you are and who you're not. Stories about what kind of life is realistic for someone like you. These stories shape your behavior. If you see yourself as someone who always procrastinates, you will procrastinate. If you see yourself as someone who isn't consistent, you will quit when things get hard. If you see yourself as someone who isn't confident, you will shrink when it's time to speak up. These identities feel true because you've practiced them. But just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's fixed. Identity is not who you are. Identity is what you repeatedly do. Change what you do, and over time, you change who you believe you are. The old self resists change because change threatens its sense of control. Even negative patterns feel predictable. Predictability feels safe to the brain. So when you start to do things differently, your mind pushes back. It brings up doubts. It brings up old fears. It reminds you of past failures. It tries to pull you back into the identity that feels known. This resistance is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something right. Resistance is the friction between who you've been and who you're becoming. If you don't feel resistance, you're probably not changing enough to require a new identity. You can't expect new outcomes while protecting old habits. If you want a disciplined life, you can't keep the habits of someone who lives on impulse. If you want confidence, you can't keep the habits of someone who avoids discomfort. If you want growth, you can't keep the habits of someone who runs from challenge. The future you want requires behaviors that the current you doesn't naturally do yet. That's why change feels awkward. You are acting like a person you're not yet comfortable being, but that discomfort is temporary. The more you practice new behaviors, the more natural they become. What feels forced today becomes automatic tomorrow. What feels unnatural now becomes your new normal later. Letting go of the old self also means letting go of environments that reinforce that old identity. The places you go, the people you spend time with, the content you consume, the routines you follow, all of these act like mirrors. They reflect back to you who you are. If your environment constantly reflects the old version of you, it becomes harder to step into a new one. This doesn't mean abandoning everyone in your life, but it does mean being honest about which environments keep you stuck in patterns you're trying to break. Growth often requires creating distance from situations that trigger the old you. Not because those situations are evil, but because they keep you in a loop that the new you is trying to escape. Another brutal truth is that your old self is emotionally attached to comfort and approval. The old self wants to be liked, wants to avoid judgment, wants to avoid looking foolish, wants to avoid failing in public. But the new life you want will require you to disappoint some people, to look awkward at first, to fail visibly, and to be misunderstood. You can't upgrade your life while protecting your image. The moment you start acting differently, people who are used to the old, you may feel uncomfortable. Some may doubt you. Some may mock you. Some may try to pull you back into the role they're familiar with. This pressure can tempt you to return to the old self just to keep the peace. But peace that costs you your growth is not peace. It's self-betrayal dressed up as harmony. Becoming a new version of yourself is less about dramatic one-time changes and more about small daily decisions. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you are feeding the new identity. Every time you choose action over excuses, you are feeding the new identity. Every time you choose long-term growth over short-term pleasure, you are feeding the new identity. Identity is not built by what you say you are. It's built by what you do when no one is watching. Over time, these small choices compound into a different character. And once your character changes, your results follow naturally. The old self will try to negotiate. It will say things like, just this once, you deserve a break. You can get serious tomorrow. These negotiations feel harmless, but they are how the old identity stays alive. Every time you give in to these small negotiations, you reinforce the old self. Every time you resist them, you weaken the old self and strengthen the new one. Growth is not about perfection. You will stumble, you will slip, but the direction of your identity matters more than isolated mistakes. Are your patterns slowly shifting? Are you becoming someone who recovers faster, who recommits quicker, who stays in the game longer? That's how transformation actually happens. At some point, You have to accept that the old version of you has taken you as far as it can. It got you here, but it can't take you where you want to go. There is no disrespect in outgrowing who you were. Growth is not betrayal of your past. It's honor to your potential. You don't become ungrateful for your journey by wanting more from yourself. You become responsible for your future by refusing to let the past define you. When you let go of the old self, you don't lose yourself. You find a deeper, stronger version of who you've always been capable of becoming. Pain is not some random punishment life throws at you. Pain is the price of becoming powerful. Every meaningful upgrade in your life comes with a cost, and that cost is discomfort, struggle, sacrifice, and sometimes straight up suffering. The version of you that wants growth but avoids pain is chasing an illusion. There is no growth without strain. There is no strength without resistance. There is no transformation without pressure. You don't get to skip the hard part and still earn the reward. The hard part is the reward because it builds the person who can actually hold the results when they arrive. Most people don't hate pain. They hate the idea of pain. They imagine pain as endless suffering, humiliation, or failure. So they run from anything that might hurt their feelings, their ego, or their comfort. But the pain that grows you is not endless. It is temporary. It is specific. It is purposeful. The pain of training your body fades, but the strength stays. The pain of discipline stings in the moment, but the confidence stays. The pain of sacrifice hurts for a season, but the freedom lasts longer. The pain of avoiding growth, on the other hand, never leaves. It turns into regret, frustration, bitterness, and self-doubt that sits quietly in your chest for years. Pain sharpens you. When life is too easy, you drift. You get sloppy with your standards. You get careless with your time. You get comfortable with mediocrity. Pain wakes you up. Pain forces you to pay attention. Pain strips away illusions. When you're under pressure, you discover what actually matters to you. You discover what you're willing to fight for and what you've been pretending to care about. Pressure reveals priorities. When things get hard, excuses fall apart. You see clearly where you've been lying to yourself about effort, commitment, and discipline. Pain doesn't just hurt. It teaches. It shows you the weak points in your character so you can strengthen them. Another truth about pain is that it builds respect for the process. When something costs you nothing, you treat it casually. When something costs you sweat, time, energy, and sacrifice, you protect it. You don't waste it. The reason people quit on their goals so easily is because they haven't invested enough pain yet. They haven't paid a price that makes quitting feel too expensive. When you've woken up early for months, trained when you didn't feel like it, stayed disciplined when no one was watching, and sacrificed comfort for growth, you don't walk away easily. Pain creates ownership. You don't abandon what you've bled for. You don't disrespect what you've suffered to build. Pain also humbles you in a healthy way. It reminds you that you are human. It reminds you that growth is earned, not given. When you struggle, your ego is challenged. You realize you're not as strong, skilled, or disciplined as you thought. That realization can either crush you or refine you. If you let it refine you, pain becomes a teacher that keeps you honest. It prevents you from becoming arrogant. It keeps you grounded in the reality that progress requires continuous effort. This humility is powerful because it keeps you open to learning. People who avoid pain often avoid feedback, correction, and challenge. They stay comfortable but stagnant. People who embrace pain stay students of life. They stay adaptable. They keep evolving. Pain also builds mental toughness. When you consistently put yourself through controlled difficulty, you expand your capacity to endure stress. You become less fragile emotionally. You stop breaking down over small setbacks. You stop quitting when things don't go perfectly. You develop the ability to stay focused when you're tired, to stay disciplined when you're bored, to stay calm when you're under pressure. This toughness doesn't come from reading quotes or watching videos. It comes from experience. It comes from being uncomfortable on purpose. It comes from finishing what you started, even when every part of you wants to stop. Over time, this toughness becomes part of your identity. You don't just do hard things. You become someone who does hard things. There's also a difference between productive pain and pointless pain. Productive pain is chosen. It comes from training, discipline, learning, building, and stretching yourself. Pointless pain is often the result of avoidance. The pain of regret, the pain of knowing you could have done more, the pain of watching others grow while you stay the same, the pain of settling for a life that doesn't challenge you. You're going to experience pain either way. The question is whether you choose the pain that builds you or accept the pain that slowly breaks you. One leads to pride, strength, and progress. The other leads to resentment, self-judgment, and stagnation. Pain also connects you to a deeper sense of meaning. When you've struggled for something, it becomes part of your story. Your scars become proof of your effort. Your setbacks become lessons that shape your wisdom. People who have never struggled often lack depth because they haven't been tested. Pain gives you substance. It gives you perspective. It teaches you empathy because you know what it feels like to struggle. It teaches you gratitude because you've experienced what it's like to not have ease. This depth makes you stronger, not just in results, but in character. You don't just become more successful. You become more grounded. One of the biggest traps is trying to avoid pain by numbing yourself with distractions. Scrolling, binge watching, over-consuming, overthinking, or constantly seeking comfort of growth. But numbing doesn't remove pain. It delays it. The discomfort you avoid today returns tomorrow with interest. The discipline you skip today shows up later as regret. The effort you avoid now becomes pressure later. Avoidance is not peace. It's borrowed comfort that must be paid back with compound interest in the future. When you accept that pain is part of the path, something shifts in you. You stop asking, why is this hard? And start asking, what is this building in me? You stop seeing struggle as a sign that you're failing and start seeing it as evidence that you're training. You stop resenting discomfort and start respecting it. This doesn't mean you enjoy pain. It means you understand its role. You stop personalizing hardship and start using it. You let pain carve you into someone sharper, stronger, and more resilient than the person who started the journey. At some point, you have to decide what kind of pain you're willing to live with. The pain of effort, sacrifice, and discipline, or the pain of regret, stagnation, and wasted potential. Both hurt, but only one builds power. When you choose pain with purpose, you stop being a victim of your circumstances and start becoming the architect of your character. Discipline is what carries you when motivation disappears. Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls with your mood, your energy, your environment, and your circumstances. Some days you wake up feeling fired up and ready to conquer the world. Other days you wake up heavy, tired, distracted, or doubting yourself. If your progress depends on how you feel, your progress will be inconsistent. Feelings are unstable. Discipline is stable. Discipline is a decision you make once and then honor daily, regardless of how you feel about it in the moment. Motivation is reactive. It responds to things happening outside of you. A video inspires you. A speech fires you up. A compliment boosts your energy. A small win makes you feel confident. But when those external triggers fade, motivation fades with them. Discipline is proactive. It doesn't wait to feel inspired. It creates inspiration through action. When you show up and do the work on days you don't feel like it, you generate momentum. That momentum becomes the fuel that motivation pretends to be. Motivation is the spark. Discipline is the engine. Sparks start fires. Engines keep them burning. The problem with relying on motivation is that motivation is selective. It shows up when things feel exciting or new. It disappears when things become repetitive, boring, or hard. But the middle of any meaningful journey is boring. Progress is built in routines. Progress is built in repetition. Progress is built in doing the same simple, uncomfortable things over and over again when no one is watching and nothing feels glamorous. Motivation hates the middle. Discipline lives in the middle. Discipline is what gets you through the days when the results are invisible and the work feels thankless. Discipline is also an identity, not just a behavior. People who are disciplined don't wake up every day and debate with themselves about whether they're going to do what they said they would do. They see themselves as the kind of person who keeps commitments. When you identify as someone who is disciplined, you don't rely on feelings to decide your actions. You act because it's who you are. Identity-based discipline is powerful because it removes the daily negotiation. You don't ask, do I feel like training today? You say, I train because I'm a person who trains. You don't ask, do I feel like working on my goals today? You say, I work on my goals because that's who I am. It's built when you choose to start, even though you don't feel ready. It's built when you continue, even though you're tired. It's built when you finish, even though no one is praising you. Most people think discipline is about grand gestures. It's not. It's about consistency and unremarkable actions. It's about doing the little things right when they don't feel important. These small acts of self-control compound over time into a powerful self-image. You start trusting yourself because you see yourself showing up repeatedly. That self-trust becomes confidence, not fake confidence, but confidence grounded in evidence. Replacing motivation with discipline also protects you from emotional sabotage. Emotions are real, but they are not reliable decision makers. You can feel discouraged and still be capable. You can feel afraid and still move forward. You can feel tired and still take one small step. When you let emotions dictate your actions, your life becomes chaotic. One good move pushes you forward. One bad move pulls you backward. Discipline creates emotional independence. You don't ignore your feelings, but you don't let them run your life. You acknowledge how you feel, and then you act based on your commitments, not your emotions. Another reason discipline matters more than motivation is that discipline builds momentum. Momentum is powerful because it reduces the effort needed to keep going. The first step is the hardest. The second step is easier. The 10th step feels natural. Discipline gets you past the friction of starting. Once you're in motion, your brain begins to cooperate. Action creates clarity. Action creates energy. Action creates belief. Waiting to feel motivated before acting keeps you stuck in zero. Discipline moves you into one, and one turns into progress. Discipline also teaches you self-respect. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen your relationship with yourself. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you weaken that relationship. Over time, broken promises create self-doubt. Kept promises create self-trust. Self-trust is the foundation of confidence. You don't become confident by repeating affirmations alone. You become confident by watching yourself do hard things consistently. Discipline is how you prove to yourself that your word matters. And when your word matters to you, your actions align with your goals more naturally. Replacing motivation with discipline doesn't mean you become robotic or joyless. It means you stop depending on fleeting emotions to build a stable life. It means you create systems that support your goals even when your feelings fluctuate. You set routines. You reduce friction. You prepare in advance. You make the right actions easier to take and the wrong actions harder to take. Discipline is strategic. It's not just willpower. It's designing your life in a way that makes consistency more likely than chaos. Discipline also creates freedom. At first, discipline feels restrictive because it requires structure and limits. But over time, that structure creates more freedom. When you are disciplined with your time, you have more time for what matters. When you are disciplined with your money, you have more financial freedom. When you are disciplined with your health, you have more physical freedom. When you are disciplined with your focus, you have more mental freedom. Lack of discipline feels free in the moment, but it leads to limitations later. Discipline feels heavy in the moment, but it leads to freedom later. One of the biggest shifts you can make is to stop asking yourself how to feel motivated and start asking yourself how to design your life so discipline is easier to maintain. That means setting clear goals, breaking them into simple daily actions, and removing unnecessary distractions. It means building routines that don't rely on willpower every day. It means committing to showing up even when your enthusiasm is low. Over time, discipline becomes less of a struggle and more of a standard. It becomes normal to do what you said you would do. It becomes normal to keep moving, even when it's hard. When discipline replaces motivation as your foundation, your progress becomes predictable. Not perfect, but predictable. You no longer rely on bursts of inspiration followed by long periods of inactivity. You build steady momentum. You build reliability into your character. You become someone who can be counted on, not just by others, but by yourself. And when you can count on yourself, you become dangerous to your old excuses. You don't need confidence to change your life. You need courage. Confidence is often misunderstood as something you're supposed to have before you take action. People think they should feel strong, certain, and ready before they move. But confidence is built after action, not before it. Courage is what moves first. Courage is the willingness to act while you're unsure, while you're afraid, while you're doubting yourself. If you wait for confidence, you will stay exactly where you are because confidence is a result, not a requirement. Most people want to feel good before they do hard things. They want the emotional reward up front. They want reassurance before risk. They want certainty before commitment. But life doesn't work like that. The emotional reward comes after the effort. The reassurance comes after you take the step. The certainty comes after you survive the uncertainty. Courage is the bridge between where you are and the confidence you want. Without courage, confidence never gets built. Courage is the uncomfortable yes you give to grow when every part of you wants to stay safe. Courage is quiet most of the time. It doesn't always look like dramatic bravery. Often, courage looks like showing up when no one is watching. It looks like trying again after you fail. It looks like starting before you feel ready. It looks like speaking up when your voice shakes. It looks like setting boundaries even when you're afraid of disappointing people. Courage is not loud or flashy. It's steady. It's the small decision to move forward when retreat would feel easier. These small acts of courage compound into a powerful identity shift over time. One of the reasons people chase confidence is because confidence feels comfortable. Confidence feels like control. Courage feels vulnerable. Courage puts you in situations where you might fail, look foolish, or be judged. That vulnerability is uncomfortable, so people avoid courage and wait for confidence to protect them. But confidence can't protect you from failure. Confidence is built by surviving failure. You don't avoid embarrassment by waiting until you're confident. You become resilient to embarrassment by experiencing it and realizing it didn't destroy you. Courage exposes you to discomfort so that confidence can grow from your survival of it. Courage also breaks the illusion that you need permission to start. Many people stay stuck because they are waiting for approval, validation, or the right time. Courage doesn't wait for permission. Courage doesn't wait for perfect conditions. Courage doesn't wait for everyone to understand your vision. Courage moves with what it has. The right time rarely arrives. The right conditions rarely appear. The right feeling rarely lasts. Courage acts in imperfect moments. That's why courageous people progress faster. They start earlier. They learn in motion. They correct along the way. They don't confuse preparation with procrastination. Another truth about courage is that it rewires how you see yourself. Every time you act courageously, You send yourself a message. I can handle hard things. That message changes yourself as fragile. You stop seeing yourself as someone who needs to be protected from discomfort. You start seeing yourself as capable. This internal shift is more powerful than any external result because it changes how you approach future challenges. Once you believe you can handle discomfort, fear loses its grip. Fear may still show up, but it no longer controls your behavior. Courage turns fear into background noise instead of a command. Courage is also contagious internally. One brave action makes the next brave action easier. The first step is the hardest because it breaks inertia. Once you move once, movement becomes more natural. This is how momentum is built. People often overestimate how hard it will be to continue and underestimate how much easier things become after they start. Courage breaks the freeze. It gets you into motion. Motion creates confidence. Confidence makes future courage feel less heavy. This cycle is how people transform their lives, not by waiting to feel fearless, but by acting while afraid until fear no longer feels like a barrier. Courage does not guarantee success. It guarantees growth. Sometimes you will act courageously and things won't work out. You may fail publicly. You might make mistakes. You might look unprepared, but even in those moments, courage pays off because you gain experience, clarity, and resilience. You learn what doesn't work. You learn what you need to improve. You learn that failure is survivable. This learning builds real confidence, not the fragile confidence that comes from staying in safe situations, but the durable confidence that comes from navigating uncertainty and coming out stronger. Courage also forces you to confront your excuses. Excuses thrive in comfort and indecision. Courage exposes excuses by replacing them with action. When you take a step, you can no longer hide behind I would have or I could have. You are now in the arena. In the arena, excuses lose power because results and feedback take over. You stop theorizing about your potential and start discovering it. Courage turns abstract dreams into concrete experiences. You move from imagining who you could be to meeting who you actually are under pressure. There is a cost to courage. The cost is temporary discomfort, temporary uncertainty, and sometimes temporary failure. But there is a higher cost to avoiding courage. The cost of avoidance is long-term regret, long-term stagnation, and long-term dissatisfaction with yourself. One cost is sharp and short-lived. The other is dull and endless. When you choose courage, you choose a shorter pain for a longer gain. When you avoid courage, you choose a longer pain for a shorter comfort. The trade is simple, even if the choice feels hard in the moment. Courage is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. The less you use it, the weaker it becomes. If you've been avoiding hard things for a long time, courage will feel heavy at first. It will feel unnatural. That doesn't mean you lack courage. It means the muscle has been unused. Start small. Take one step that scares you. A little, then another. Over time, your tolerance for discomfort grows. Your capacity to act despite fear expands. What once felt terrifying becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes part of your normal behavior. At the end of the day, waiting for confidence is just another way of waiting for safety. But safety doesn't build the life you want. Courage does. Courage is the decision to move even when your voice shakes, even when your hands tremble, even when your mind is full of doubt. Confidence will meet you on the other side of that decision, not before. You've heard the truth today, and deep down you already knew it before you press play. Nothing changes if nothing changes. You can watch 100 videos, feel inspired for a moment, nod your head in agreement, and then go right back to the same routines that kept you stuck in the first place. Inspiration without action is just entertainment. And you didn't come here to be entertained. You came here because some part of you is tired of repeating the same year in a different calendar. Some part of you is tired of knowing you're capable of more, but living like you're not. That tension you feel right now is not discomfort, it's honesty. It's the gap between who you are and who you know you could become. Right now, in this moment, there is a version of you watching this who still has a choice. You can close this video and go back to comfort, back to excuses, back to telling yourself that one day you'll get serious. Or you can decide that this is the moment you stop negotiating with your potential. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. Because the future is not built in grand speeches. It's built in small decisions made in ordinary moments when no one is watching. The decision to get up when it's easier to stay down. The decision to start when you don't feel ready. The decision to keep going when it would be seer to quit. Those small decisions don't feel powerful in the moment, but they are the bricks that build a powerful life. You don't need a perfect plan to start. You don't need perfect confidence. You don't need permission. You need one honest action. One step out of the comfort zone you've been living in. One promise to yourself that you actually keep. And then another. Momentum is born from movement, not from thinking about moving. The version of you that's waiting to feel ready will never arrive. The version of you that takes action will surprise you. You will discover strength you didn't know you had. You will discover discipline you didn't think you could build. You will discover courage that only shows up when you stop hiding from discomfort. There will be days when you doubt yourself again. There will be days when you feel tired, unmotivated, and unsure. That's normal. The difference is not that those days disappear. The difference is what you do on those days. Do you let them decide your direction, or do you move anyway? Do you let temporary feelings rewrite permanent goals, or do you remind yourself why you started? Growth is not about being perfect. It's about being relentless in your commitment to move forward, even when forward feels heavy. Remember this. The life you want is on the other side of the habits you're avoiding. The confidence you want is on the other side of the actions you're afraid to take. The strength you want is on the other side of the struggle you've been trying to escape. Nothing meaningful is waiting for you inside your comfort zone. Everything that can change your life is waiting just outside of it. The door is already open. The only question left is whether you're going to step through it or stand there convincing yourself you will someday. This is your moment. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're here, aware, and capable of choosing differently. Don't waste that awareness. Don't let this be another video you agree with and forget. Let it be the line you draw between the old pattern and the new direction. When this video ends, the noise will return. The distractions will return, but so will you. And when you show up differently, even in one small way today, you start proving to yourself that this wasn't just another speech. This was the moment you decided to move.